The autumn wind cut through Redemption Creek like a blade, carrying with it the scent of dying sage and wood smoke. Sarah Mitchell stood in the town square, her black mourning dress hanging loose on a frame that had grown gaunt with grief and hunger. 3 weeks. That's how long it had been since they'd buried Thomas, her husband of barely 8 months, in the Hardscrabble Cemetery on the hill. Cholera had swept through the wagon train like God's own judgment, leaving her stranded in this dusty frontier town with nothing but a wedding ring and 17 cents. Mrs. Mitchell, Mayor Dalton's voice boomed across the square, drawing the attention of every soul within earshot. The town council has made its decision. Given your circumstances, we're prepared to offer you a choice. He gestured to the line of men assembled before her. Shopkeepers, ranch hands, even old Cyrus the blacksmith, all widowers themselves or bachelors, looking for a wife without the courting. Pick one. He'll provide for you, and you'll keep his house. It's the Christian thing to do. Sarah's fingers twisted around the thin gold band on her finger. The only thing of value I appreciate the council's concern, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. But I'm not choosing a husband from a lineup like I'm selecting a horse. If you're enjoying this tale of courage and unexpected love in the Wild West, please take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and hit that like button. It truly means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Your support keeps these tales alive. Now see here, Mayor Dalton sputtered, his face reddening. Let her speak. The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and quiet, but it cut through the murmuring like thunder rolling across distant hills. The crowd parted, and Sarah saw him for the first time. Cade Blackwood stood 6'3", broad-shouldered beneath a worn leather duster, his black hat pulled low over eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from the war everyone whispered about, but nobody dared ask him to explain. He lived alone in the canyonlands north of town, running a small horse ranch that produced the finest cutting horses in 3 territories. People crossed the street when they saw him coming. Mothers pulled their children close. The rumors swirled that he'd killed a dozen men, that he'd ridden with Quantrill's raiders, that something dark and dangerous lived in his soul. Blackwood, the mayor said, his tone shifting to something between respect and fear. This doesn't concern you, doesn't it? Cade's gaze fixed on Sarah, and she felt the weight of it like a physical thing. You're offering this woman up like merchandise. Seems to me that concerns any decent person. We're trying to help her, Cyrus interjected. She's got no money, no family, winter's coming. Then give her work, not a prison sentence. Cade took 3 steps forward, and the crowd instinctively backed away. He stopped directly in front of Sarah, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, she could see they weren't just gray. They held flecks of silver, like moonlight on water. Ma'am, I heard you tried to sell your ring this morning. Heat flooded her cheeks, so the whole town knew of her desperation. I did. Mr. Patterson said it wasn't worth enough. Patterson's a fool. Cade's jaw tightened. But he's right about one thing. Gold isn't what you need here. He paused and something shifted in his expression, a crack in that stone exterior. You need a place to stay, food, safety. I've got a ranch that could use an extra pair of hands. I'm not offering marriage, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm offering work, fair wages, separate quarters, and respect. Nothing more, nothing less. The square had gone silent. Sarah could feel every eye on her, could practically hear the scandal brewing in their minds. A widow, alone with Cade Blackwood? She might as well paint a scarlet letter on her chest. "What kind of work?" she asked, surprising herself. "Cooking, mending, garden work? I've got 3 ranch hands who eat like bears and have the domestic skills of wild boars. Place needs a woman's touch." He pulled off his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. "I'll be honest, Mrs. Mitchell. I'm not a man who talks much. I keep to myself. But I give you my word, you'll be safe under my roof. Safer than anywhere else in this territory." Mayor Dalton stepped forward. "Now hold on, Blackwood. This isn't proper." "Proper?" Kate's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Like forcing a grieving woman to marry a stranger? That kind of proper?" Sarah looked at the mayor, at the line of men who'd been willing to take her as part of some civic duty, then back at the scarred stranger who'd just offered her the one thing none of them had: a choice. "Take Mr. Blackwood's offer," she said clearly. The gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Sarah, Mrs. Mitchell," Mayor Dalton tried again. "My decision is made." She turned to Cade, her heart hammering against her ribs. "When do we leave?" Something that might have been approval flickered in those storm-gray eyes. "Now's as good a time as any. You got belongings?" "A carpet bag at the boarding house. Everything I own fits inside it." "Then let's get it and go." He settled his hat back on his head and offered her his arm, a gesture of courtesy that seemed almost foreign on such a rough-hewn man. "Welcome to the Blackwood Ranch, Mrs. Mitchell." As his calloused hand steadied her elbow and they walked through the parted crowd, Sarah realized she'd just made the first real choice of her entire life. She'd chosen the man everyone feared. She just hoped she'd live long enough to discover why. The ride to Blackwood Ranch took 2 hours, following a narrow trail that wound through Red Rock canyons and across meadows where autumn grass bent golden in the wind. Cade had given her his horse, a buckskin mare with gentle eyes, while he rode a massive black stallion that seemed to match its owner's temperament perfectly. They hadn't spoken since leaving town, and Sarah found herself studying him from behind, noting the way he sat in the saddle like he'd been born there, the easy confidence in every movement. The sun was beginning its descent when they crested a ridge, and Sarah caught her first glimpse of her new home. The ranch house sat in a protected valley, built from honey-colored logs and river stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Behind it, a barn, stable, and several outbuildings formed a neat compound. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. A creek ran through the property, its water catching the golden light like scattered diamonds. It was beautiful. Unexpectedly so. "The hands are out checking fence lines," Cade said, the first words he'd spoken since they left Redemption Creek. "They'll be back by supper. That's your domain now, if you're willing." "I'm a decent cook," Sarah said, then amended honestly, "I'm learning to be a decent cook. My mother tried to teach me, but I was more interested in books than kitchen skills." That earned her a glance, quick but assessing. "You read?" "Whenever I can find something to read." "Do you have books?" "Some." He dismounted in one fluid motion and came to help her down. His hands circled her waist, and she was struck by the warmth of them through her dress, the easy strength as he lifted her down like she weighed nothing. "My mother was a schoolteacher before." Before what? He didn't say, and Sarah didn't ask. The house interior surprised her even more. The main room held a massive stone fireplace, comfortable furniture worn soft with use, and, her breath caught, an entire wall of shelves lined with books. Dozens of them, maybe 100. Your room's through there, Cade said, gesturing to a door on the right. It's got its own entrance to the porch, and there's a bolt on the inside. Use it. I meant what I said about safety and respect. Sarah turned to face him, really look at him for the first time in proper light. The scar was more prominent now, but it didn't make him ugly. If anything, it added to an already harsh kind of handsomeness. His eyes were tired, she realized. Bone-deep tired, like a man who hadn't slept peacefully in years. "Why did you do this?" she asked. "Help me, I mean. You don't even know me." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze going to the fire someone had banked that morning. "I know what it's like to have your choices taken away, to be pushed into a corner with nowhere to turn." He looked back at her, and the raw honesty in his face made her breath catch. No one should have to live like that. Especially not someone who just lost everything. "Thank you," she said softly. "Mr. Blackwood." "Cade. Just Cade." Cade. She tested the name, found it suited him. "I promise, I'll earn my keep. I won't be a burden." "Didn't think you would be." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "Mrs. Mitchell, one more thing. Sarah. If I'm to call you Cade, then please call me Sarah." The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but close. "Sarah, don't let the men bother you with crude talk. They're good workers, but rough around the edges. You have any trouble, any at all, you tell me, understand?" She nodded, something warm unfurling in her chest. How long had it been since anyone had offered to protect her? Not as property, not as a duty, but simply because it was right. "I understand." After he left, Sarah explored her new quarters. The room was simple, but clean. A bed with a thick quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin. A window looked out over the creek, where cottonwoods were just beginning to turn gold. She set her carpet bag on the bed and sank down beside it, suddenly exhausted. Only then did she let herself cry, not from sadness this time, but from relief. For the first time in weeks, she had a roof over her head that she'd chosen, a place where no one was forcing her into a mold she didn't fit, a place where maybe, just maybe, she could figure out who Sarah Mitchell was supposed to be. The ranch hands arrived just before sunset, and Sarah heard them before she saw them. Rough voices, the jingle of spurs, the stamp of hooves. She'd spent the last hour exploring the kitchen, finding it surprisingly well stocked, but showing signs of masculine neglect. Dishes piled in the basin, a floor needing a good sweep, the stove crusted with old grease. She'd rolled up her sleeves and gotten to work. Now, standing at the stove, stirring a pot of beef stew she'd assembled from supplies in the cellar, she heard the back door open and the voices fall abruptly silent. "Well, I'll be damned," someone muttered. Sarah turned to find 3 men crowded in the doorway, staring at her like she'd sprouted wings. They ranged in age from maybe 20 to past 50. The youngest was ginger-haired and freckled, the oldest had a gray beard that reached his chest, and the middle one was lean and wiry with sharp eyes. "Good evening," she said, keeping her voice level despite her racing heart. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I'll be handling the cooking and household matters from now on. Supper will be ready in 20 minutes. The graybeard recovered first, snatching off his hat. "Ma'am, name's Walt Finnegan. These 2 yahoos are Jesse," he nodded to the young one, "and Pike, the wiry one. Pleased to meet you all. There's fresh coffee if you'd like to wash up first." They practically stampeded out, and Sarah heard urgent whispered conversation on the porch. Then Cade's deeper voice, though she couldn't make out the words. When they filed back in 20 minutes later, They'd scrubbed the trail dust off and slicked their hair down. They sat at the long wooden table in cautious silence as Sarah served the stew with fresh biscuits, her mother's recipe, one of the few things she could make reliably. Cade took his place at the head of the table. "Sarah's going to be working here," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "She's under my protection. Anyone has a problem with that, speak now or ride out." The three hands exchanged glances. Finally, Pike spoke up. "No problem, boss. Though the town's gonna talk." "The town always talks." Cade took a bite of stew, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. "This is good, Sarah. Real good. Thank you." She just sat down with her own bowl when Jesse cleared his throat. "Ma'am, not to pry, but you're the widow from town? The one the mayor was trying to marry off?" Sarah's spine straightened. "I am, and I chose to work for Cade instead of becoming someone's charity case wife." Walt let out a bark of laughter. "Good for you, ma'am. Half those men just wanted a housekeeper they didn't have to pay. You're better off here, even if old Cade's got the personality of a thundercloud." "Watch it," Cade said mildly, but Sarah caught the glimmer of humor in his eyes. The rest of the meal passed in easy conversation, the hands telling her about the ranch, the horses, the upcoming winter preparations. They were rough men, yes, but not cruel. They treated her with respect, probably more out of fear of Cade than anything else, but she'd take it. After dinner, as she washed the dishes, Cade appeared at her elbow with a dish towel. "I'll dry." "You don't have to." "I know." He picked up a plate. "But the hands are watching through the window, and I want to make a point." Sarah glanced over, and sure enough, three faces quickly disappeared from view. "What point is that?" "That you're not a servant here. You're earning wages same as them. We share the work." He dried the plate with careful precision, like it was something precious. "Fair's fair." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the domesticity of it strange and somehow soothing. Then Cade spoke again, his voice low. "You did good tonight. The men liked you. They were kind." She handed him another plate, though I suspect that's more about fearing you than liking me. "Maybe at first." He set the plate in the cupboard. "But that stew would win over a grizzly bear. Where'd you learn to cook like that?" "My mother." She said a woman should know how to feed her family, even if she never planned to have one. Sarah paused, surprised she'd revealed that much. "I was engaged once, in Boston, to a banker's son my father chose. I couldn't go through with it." "Why not?" "Because he looked at me like I was furniture, something pretty to arrange in his perfect life." She scrubbed a pot harder than necessary. "Then my parents died in a fire. I had nothing, no one. Thomas seemed kind, and he offered to marry me. So I said yes." "Was he?" Cade asked quietly. "Kind?" "He tried to be. But he married me because he needed someone to cook and clean on the wagon train west, and I married him because I needed to eat. Neither of us was happy." She set the pot aside, staring out the window at the darkening sky. "Then he died, and I felt guilty for feeling relieved. What kind of person does that make me?" Cade was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle in a way she hadn't expected. "It makes you honest and brave. Not many people can admit their own truth like that." She turned to find him watching her, those storm-gray eyes seeing more than she'd intended to reveal. Her breath caught. He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could smell wood smoke and leather and something else. Something uniquely him. "Cade," she started, not sure what she meant to say. You should get some rest, he said, stepping back abruptly. Dawn comes early on a ranch. The moment broke and Sarah nodded, suddenly exhausted. Thank you for today, for all of it. Don't thank me yet. Something haunted flickered across his face. Winter's coming and it's hard country. You might wish you'd chosen one of those town men after all. I doubt that very much, she said firmly. After she'd gone to her room and slid the bolt home, more from habit than fear, Sarah lay in bed, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Somewhere an owl hooted. The creek burbled its endless song. And from the main house, she heard the creak of floorboards as Cade moved about, restless. She thought about his hands steadying her on the horse, the gentleness in his voice when he'd defended her, the way he dried dishes like it was the most natural thing in the world. Everyone in town feared him. But lying there in the darkness, Sarah found she wasn't afraid. She was curious, and that, she suspected, might be even more dangerous. The first week passed in a blur of work and discovery. Sarah fell into the rhythm of ranch life easier than she'd expected. Up before dawn to start breakfast, tending the kitchen garden Walt had shown her, learning to bake bread in the massive cast-iron stove. The hands were true to their word, treating her with respect and even a rough kind of affection. But it was Cade who fascinated her. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. Every morning, he left a mug of coffee on the kitchen table before she woke, fixed just the way she liked it. He must have been watching to learn her preference. When the autumn rains came and the roof over her room leaked, he spent an entire day patching it, refusing her offers to help. And the books, he left them on her nightstand, one at a time, always something he thought she'd enjoy. Dickens, Emerson, even a scandalous copy of Jane Eyre that made her blush. "You've read this?" she asked him one evening, holding up the novel. He was mending a bridle by the fire, his large hands surprisingly deft with the leatherwork. "My mother loved it, read it to me when I was a boy, even though my father said it wasn't fitting for a young man." A ghost of a smile. "I think she hoped it would make me romantic. Did it work? You tell me." He looked up, and the firelight cast shadows across the planes of his face, making the scar stand out. "Do I seem like a romantic man to you, Sarah?" The way he said her name, soft, almost careful, made her heart skip. "I think you're more romantic than you let on. You just hide it behind all that silence and scowling. Someone's feeling brave tonight. Someone's been living under your roof for a week and hasn't seen any of the danger everyone warned me about." She set the book aside. "Why do they fear you, Cade? What happened?" His hands stilled on the bridle. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he sighed, setting the leather aside. "During the war, I rode with the Confederate cavalry. Did things I'm not proud of. Killed men, too many men." His voice was flat, emotionless, but she could see the cost in his eyes. "After Appomattox, I came west to forget, to start over, but some stains don't wash off." "You're not that man anymore," Sarah said softly. "How do you know?" "Because that man wouldn't have saved me, wouldn't have given me a choice when everyone else wanted to take mine away." She moved closer, kneeling beside his chair. "The man I've come to know this week is kind, patient. He dries dishes and leaves books and fixes roofs in the rain. That's the real Cade Blackwood." His hand came up, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was feather-light, but it sent electricity racing down her spine. "You see me clearer than I see myself," he murmured. Then maybe you should look through my eyes sometime. They were close now, so close she could count his heartbeats in the pulse at his throat. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she found herself leaning into the touch like a flower to the sun. "Sarah," he breathed, and there was want in it, and warning. "I'm not a good man. I've got ghosts that won't let me sleep. Nightmares. I wake up swinging sometimes." "I have nightmares too," she interrupted. "About the wagon train. About watching Thomas die while I could do nothing. My parents' house burning while I was visiting friends." She caught his wrist, held his hand against her face. "We're both haunted, Cade. Maybe we can be haunted together." He made a sound low in his throat, pain and longing mixed, and then he was pulling away, standing, putting distance between them. "You should go to bed. It's late." "Cade, please, Sarah." His back was to her, his shoulders rigid. "Don't make this harder than it already is." She wanted to argue, to push, but something in his voice stopped her. So she stood, smoothing her skirt, and moved toward her room. At the doorway, she paused. "I'm not afraid of your darkness," she said quietly, "and I'm not going anywhere." She didn't wait for his response, just slipped into her room and closed the door softly behind her. But she heard it anyway, barely a whisper through the wood. "That's what I'm afraid of." October gave way to November, and with it came the first serious snow. Sarah woke one morning to find the world transformed, everything blanketed in white, the mountains disappearing into clouds, the air sharp enough to burn the lungs. "Storm's coming," Walt announced at breakfast. "Big one. We need to get the herd down from the high pasture before we're snowed in." "How long do we have?" Cade asked, his eyes on the window. "Day, maybe 2 if we're lucky. Then we ride today. Jesse, you and Pike start bringing the horses in. Walt, help me get the supply packs ready." He glanced at Sarah. "Can you handle things here alone for a few days?" Her heart sank. A few days without him? But she kept her voice steady. "Of course. I'll keep the fires going and the water from freezing. Rifles over the mantel. You know how to shoot?" "No." Something flickered in his expression. "Then you're learning. Come on." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the snow behind the barn, watching Cade set up bottles on a fence post. He came back to her, pulled a Winchester from its scabbard, and pressed it into her hands. "It's heavier than I expected," she said. "Good. Means you'll think twice before using it." He moved behind her, his chest against her back, his arms coming around to guide her hands into position. "Stock against your shoulder, firm. Left hand here, supporting the barrel. Right hand on the grip, finger outside the trigger guard until you're ready to fire." Sarah tried to focus on his words, but all she could think about was the solid warmth of him, the way his breath stirred her hair, the gentleness in his touch, despite the lethal weapon they held between them. "Now," his voice was low, intimate. "Sight down the barrel. See that notch at the end? Line it up with your target. Breathe. On the exhale, squeeze. Don't pull the trigger. Smooth and steady." She did as instructed, her heart hammering for reasons that had nothing to do with the rifle. The weapon kicked against her shoulder, and one of the bottles exploded in a spray of glass. "Good," Cade murmured, still close. Again. They practiced until she could hit 4 out of 5 bottles, until her shoulder ached and her ears rang, despite the snow muffling the sound. Only then did Cade step back, and the cold rushed in where his warmth had been. "If anyone comes while we're gone," he said, his expression serious, You don't open the door unless you know them. Understand? There's men who might think a woman alone is easy prey. I understand. She held the rifle more confidently now. But I'll be fine. You focus on getting the herd down safely. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes. Duty versus desire. What he wanted versus what he thought was right. Finally, he reached out and squeezed her shoulder. Brief, but warm. We'll be back before you know it. They left within the hour, 4 men riding into the teeth of the approaching storm. Sarah stood on the porch, watching until they disappeared into the white distance, feeling suddenly very alone. The first day passed quietly enough. She kept busy, baking bread, mending clothes, organizing the pantry. The rifle stayed close, loaded and ready. Night fell early, and she bolted herself in the main house rather than her separate room. The isolation suddenly oppressive. The second day brought the storm in earnest. Wind howled around the house like a living thing, driving snow so thick she couldn't see the barn. She fed the fires, melted snow for water, and tried not to think about Cade out there in the white hell. The third day, she heard hoofbeats. Sarah grabbed the rifle and went to the window, peering out through the frost. 3 riders approached through the storm, but they weren't Cade and his men. These riders wore long dusters, their faces wrapped in scarves, moving with the predatory purpose of wolves. Her blood ran cold. She checked the bolt on the door, then positioned herself by the window, where she could see without being easily seen. The riders stopped in the yard. One dismounted, tried the door. When it didn't open, he pounded on it with his fist. "Open up! We need shelter from the storm!" Sarah stayed silent, rifle trained on the door. "I know someone's in there. I can see smoke from the chimney." More pounding. "Open this door, or we'll break it down." "Go away," Sarah called out, keeping her voice strong despite her fear. "You're not welcome here." A pause. Then laughter, cold and cruel. "A woman. Boys, we got ourselves a woman alone." The second rider dismounted, and together they charged the door. It shuddered, but held. Solid oak, built to last. Sarah's hands tightened on the rifle. Her heart hammered so hard she thought they might hear it. The men backed up, clearly preparing for another assault. Then she heard it. More hoofbeats. Coming fast. 4 riders burst through the curtain of snow, and even through the storm, she knew that black stallion. Cade. He'd come back. The would-be intruders froze. Cade dismounted before his horse fully stopped, and even from inside, Sarah could see the cold fury in his body language. "You boys lost?" His voice carried even through the wind, deadly calm. "Just looking for shelter, friend," the first man said, trying for friendly and failing. "My door says otherwise. Looks like you were trying to break it down. Now listen." "No, you listen." Cade took a step forward, and both men stepped back. "You've got 3 seconds to get on your horses and ride out. If I ever see you on my land again, I won't be asking questions before I start shooting." "There's 3 of us and 4 of you," the second man blustered. "And I'm Cade Blackwood." Just his name, but it landed like a blow. "Still want to try your luck?" The men scrambled for their horses, nearly falling in their haste. Within seconds, they were galloping away into the storm. Cade watched until they disappeared, then turned toward the house. Sarah was already unbolting the door, and when she pulled it open, their eyes met. "You came back," she said, her voice shaking, now that the danger had passed. "I told you I'd keep you safe." He stepped inside, snow clinging to his coat and hat. Behind him, Walt and the others were leading the horses to the barn. "Are you hurt?" "No, just scared." She was trembling now, the rifle heavy in her hands. They were going to break down the door, and I didn't know if I could actually shoot them, and… Hey. He took the rifle gently, set it aside, and pulled her into his arms. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now. I'm here." She buried her face in his chest, breathing in snow and leather and him, letting his solid presence anchor her. His arms tightened around her, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I should have left someone with you. I knew it was too dangerous." "You couldn't have known." She pulled back enough to look up at him. "And I handled it. I did what you taught me." Pride flickered in his eyes. "You did. You were brave. I was terrified." Being brave means doing what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. His thumb brushed across her cheek, and she realized she was crying. "Come on, let's get you warm." He led her to the fireside, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and pressed a cup of coffee into her hands. Only then did she notice how cold he was, his lips tinged blue, his hands shaking. "Cade, you're frozen. How long have you been riding?" "Left the herd with the boys yesterday morning, when I saw the storm getting worse. Rode through the night to get back." He managed a wry smile. "Couldn't shake the feeling you needed me." "You rode all night? In that storm?" She set down her coffee and took his hands, rubbing warmth back into them. "You could have died." "But I didn't." His gaze was intense, burning despite his frozen state. "And you're safe. That's all that matters." "You matter," she said fiercely. "You matter to me." The air between them charged, electric. His hands turned in hers, gripping now instead of being held, and he leaned closer. "Sarah," he breathed, "if I kiss you right now, I won't want to stop." "Then don't stop." His control, already threadbare, snapped. He kissed her like a drowning man finding air, desperate, hungry and achingly tender all at once. Sarah melted into him, the blanket falling away as her arms wound around his neck. He tasted like coffee and snow and promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake," he whispered. "No," she said firmly. "This is the first thing that's felt right in years." He pulled back to look at her, searching her face. Whatever he saw there made something shift in his expression, a wall crumbling, a door opening. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to be someone worth loving." "You already are," she cupped his scarred cheek. "You just have to believe it." Outside, the storm raged, but inside, wrapped in each other's arms by the fire, Sarah and Cade found something neither had dared hope for: home. The storm lasted 4 more days, trapping them all at the ranch. But what might have been a hardship became something precious. Time suspended, the outside world forgotten. The hands bunked in the barn, giving Cade and Sarah the house to themselves, and the enforced proximity broke down what remained of their walls. Cade taught her to play chess in the evenings, and they discovered she had a gift for strategy that delighted him. She read to him from the books he'd given her, and found he had thoughts on literature that surprised her with their depth. They cooked together, learning each other's rhythms in the domestic dance. And when the nightmares came, his, hers, sometimes both, they held each other through the darkness until dawn brought peace again. On the 5th morning, Sarah woke to find Cade already up, standing at the window, watching the sunrise paint the snow-covered world in shades of gold and rose. "It's beautiful," she said, coming to stand beside him. "It is." But he was looking at her, not the landscape. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." Her heart clenched. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just true." He took her hand, his calloused fingers lacing with hers. "I went to the war a young man who thought he knew what courage meant. I came back knowing I'd been a fool. I'd done things." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought I was broken, thought the best I could do was isolate myself out here, where I couldn't hurt anyone else." "Cade, let me finish, please." He turned to face her fully. "Then you stumbled into my life. This brave, stubborn woman who refused to be anyone's victim, who stood in a town square and chose her own path, even though it meant choosing the monster everyone feared." His hand came up to cradle her face. "You made me want to be better, made me believe I could be." "You already were," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "You just couldn't see it. I'm seeing it now, through your eyes, like you said." He smiled, and it transformed his face, made him almost boyishly handsome. "I'm seeing that maybe I deserve a second chance, that maybe we both do." "We do," she whispered. "Then marry me, Sarah Mitchell, not because you need saving, and not because I need a housekeeper. Marry me because I love you, because you're the bravest person I've ever met, because I want to spend every day for the rest of my life being worthy of you." Joy burst through her chest like sunrise. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. And when he kissed her this time, it tasted like promises and possibility and forever. They married a week later in the ranch's main room, with Walt officiating. He'd been a circuit preacher before becoming a ranch hand. And Jesse and Pike as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple blue dress, and Cade wore his best clothes. His hair slicked back, and his hands shaking slightly as he slid his mother's ring onto Sarah's finger. "I, Cade Blackwood, take you, Sarah Mitchell, to be my wife," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I promise to honor you, protect you, and love you for all my days. Your fight is my fight. Your joy is my joy. Together." "Together," she repeated, then spoke her own vows. "I, Sarah Mitchell, take you, Cade Blackwood, to be my husband. I promise to stand by you, believe in you, and love you through darkness and light. You saw me when I was invisible. You chose me when I had nothing. Together." When Walt pronounced them husband and wife, the hands cheered, and Cade kissed his bride like she was the most precious thing in all the world. That night, alone in the master bedroom that was now theirs, Cade held Sarah close, his hands gentle as he undid the buttons of her dress. "Go slow," she whispered, not from fear, but from wanting to savor every moment. "I want to remember everything." "I'll die before I hurt you," he promised, and proved it with every tender touch, every whispered word of love. Later, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Sarah traced the scar on his face. "This doesn't define you," she said softly. "Your kindness does, your courage, your heart." "Our hearts," he corrected, catching her hand and pressing it to his chest. "Can't you feel it? They beat together now." She could. In the quiet of the night, in the warmth of their bed, she could feel the truth of it. They'd both been broken, both been lost, but together they were whole. Winter deepened, but inside the ranch house, spring bloomed eternal. Sarah learned to ride and shoot with real skill, becoming a true partner in running the ranch. Cade opened up more, sharing stories of his childhood, his mother's wisdom. even the darkest parts of his past. They built a life together. Not perfect, but real and honest and deeply loving. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell softly outside and a fire crackled in the hearth, Cade gave Sarah a beautifully bound journal. "For your thoughts," he said. "You're always reading other people's stories. Maybe it's time you wrote your own." She opened the first page and found his handwriting there. The story of a woman brave enough to choose her own path, and the man lucky enough to walk beside her. "Love, see. Thank you," she whispered, pulling him close. "For everything, for seeing me, for choosing me." "Always," he promised. "From that first moment in the town square, it's always been you." Outside, the world was frozen and harsh. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah and Cade Blackwood had everything they needed: love, home, and the courage to face whatever came together. Epilogue. 5 years later, spring came to the ranch in an explosion of wildflowers and new life. Sarah stood on the porch, one hand on her swollen belly, watching Cade teach their 4-year-old daughter, Rose, how to sit a horse. His patience was infinite, his voice gentle. Cade looked over and caught her watching. The smile he gave her still made her heart skip, full of warmth and wonder, like he couldn't quite believe his luck. He said something to Rose, then lifted her down and sent her running toward the house. "Mama, did you see? I rode all by myself." "I saw, sweetheart. You were magnificent." Sarah caught her daughter up in a hug, breathing in the scent of sunshine and horse and childhood joy. Cade climbed the porch steps and slipped an arm around both of them. "My girls," he murmured, pressing a kiss to Sarah's temple. "And soon, one more," she reminded him, patting her belly. "Or one more boy," he countered, his hand covering hers. "Either way, they'll be lucky to have you as their mother." "We're all lucky," Sarah said, leaning into his strength. She thought back to that day in the town square, when she'd been alone and terrified and desperate, when a scarred stranger had offered her a choice instead of a prison. Lucky to have found each other. "Not luck," Cade said firmly. "Fate. Some things are just meant to be." As the sun set over the mountains and their daughter played at their feet, Sarah looked out at the land they'd built together and knew he was right. This life, imperfect, challenging, but deeply good, was exactly where she was meant to be. The widow who'd chosen the man everyone feared had found something precious, a love worth fighting for, a home worth building, and a future bright with promise. Together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Sarah and Cade's journey? Did their story touch your heart? Your feedback means the world to us.